Rita Anwiri is a legal professional with a passion for educating creatives about intellectual property rights. She's here to share her journey from being an intellectual property lawyer to becoming a dynamic podcaster.
I'm pretty sure it's Techzilla.
Hi, I'm Rita Anwiri of IP Series, and you are listening to Into the Podverse with Tony Doe. Cheers, guys.
Rita Anwiri, an intellectual property and information technology lawyer, shares her transition from the legal profession to becoming a podcaster. Her goal is to educate creatives about intellectual property and its potential.
Well, I would say first, my foundation. I did not want to study a course and end up not using my certificate. So I made sure that when I got back into Nigeria after I was doing my master's in the UK, I wanted to educate people about intellectual property. I wanted creatives to be able to be aware of the potential of what their human intellect, their output of their creations, inventions, and all of those things. So after law school, I worked for a virtual law firm. And then, because the firm was specialized in intellectual property, it was easier for me to continue kind of like felt like I was on track to my goal. And, sometime in 2019 or 2018, 2019, I think, there was this post that was viral about intellectual property, and someone made a comment that I knew was wrong. So I just sat down, did a bit of research, and then just came up with a Twitter thread, and that was how I began microblogging. But then my friend Chungi, I call her my Chungi, we both love South Korean series, but she motivated me and encouraged me to consider other media formats such as podcasting and blogging. And I kept telling her I was going to think about it. And, then I came across a post by Mo Trivius, and that post stated ways to create multimedia content. And podcasting was part of it. So I was like, okay, cool. Then the pandemic came, and I was on Twitter one day and I saw a tweet by Lola the Duffelbag, who is a senior colleague in the industry. And he listened to the most recent episode of my podcast, and the link was attached. So I went to that link and I was like, okay, this looks like something I can do. And I think at that point, there was this very controversial case on collective management organizations and copyright owners. And I just thought to myself, why don't I, start this podcast thing? So I sat down, did a few takes, I recorded, and I was like, okay, this isn't good. I kept doing several takes, and then my allergies started to set in. I think if you listen to my first episode ever, you hear me sniffing a lot. So once I was done recording, I published it, and I got good reviews and feedbacks from people. And I got a comment from someone who was like, oh, you were sniffing a lot. And I was like, apologies. That's because of my allergies. And then, so I just knew that going forward, for every time I started to get that sign that my allergies were going to start acting, I had to pause. But I'll say the motivation to keep podcasting, basically is in line with my goals to educate people, make sure people are informed, to be an IP advocate, an IP educator, to sensitize the general public. And I would say that post-pandemic, a lot of Nigerians have paid more interest into intellectual property. So yeah, I would say it all worked out for me at the end of the day.
Rita's podcasting process involves a thorough research, structuring content, and preparing for episodes.
As of today, I have 107 episodes. But my thought process for researching and preparing is first identify the type of IP I need to talk about, then what elements of that IP do I really need to focus on. So when I figure that part out, so first I'll say is go through the link that was shared regarding the case. And if you're lucky, there's a judgment attached to it. I also take my time to go through the judgments. I see that a lot with foreign cases when I'm reviewing or preparing a content or an episode. Very few Nigerian cases, it's hard for you to find the judgment. Sometimes you may be lucky to get access to the judgment. Sometimes you may not be lucky, so you're just relying on online publication. So while reading that, you look in between the lines. Not you can't just focus. I don't. Well, let me just say you can't. I do not focus on headlines. And the headlines are great, good for clickbait and all those things. But then when I'm reading it, I'm looking out for what is that silent point, what is that thing that everyone is not seeing or talking about. And then I start to read, and then I start to research. Then I put in my structure. Okay, this will be the intro, this will be the main body, and this will be the concluding part. If it's just me, I try to visualize I'm talking to people and they're seeing me, you know. But if I have a guest, I sometimes send my guest questions ahead, or I've already pre-informed them that, okay, this is what our conversation is going to be. I'm like, okay, cool. So sometimes some of my guests are like, okay, send me questions. Some are like, okay, we're going to wing it. So if we're going to wing it, that means I still have to prepare questions for my guest ahead of time so that, I'm not taken aback or stuck in the middle. And I'll say my structure changes with time based on research on how to podcast, getting it, putting down your scripts, and focusing on the other elements in terms of marketing and branding. You also have to consider using books, articles, interviews, conversation with colleagues. So that's how the whole thing end up. And once I'm done with that, and I put it down, in writing, I'm good to go.
Rita's podcast gained global recognition, impacting listeners internationally. Positive feedback and commendations validated her efforts, reinforcing her role as an IP advocate and educator.
Success story for me was the first time that my podcast got featured during the pandemic as the top 10 trade secrets podcasts. And I think I was number 9 or 10, or I can't remember, but I was the only Nigerian IP podcast that was featured there, and that meant a lot. And that was done by Feed Sports, I think that's what they're called. Then my friend Beverly always refers to my podcast as the only IP Sub-Saharan podcast in Africa, and that is huge. Success story, I'm always glad when someone is, let's say, blessed, or my content, my podcast helps them with their research or their case. Feedback from listeners have always been, you're doing a fantastic job. Thank you so much. I've learned a lot from you. Well, getting to know that I'm actually making a difference, because my prayer has always been that God should show me how I can make a difference in the legal profession, and I think I'm doing that via my podcast today, in helping people understand IP better. So it's kind of like IP basic, or a crash course on intellectual property if you listen to my podcast or you follow any of my IP series content. Success story, meeting incredible people. I met one of the actors from Friday the 13th in one of my episodes. I had to Google him afterwards. Then having to meet one of the foremost IP lawyers in Uganda. Getting the opportunity to talk to my mentors all the way from Europe. Eleonora and Rose Bobridge meant a lot. And success story again, Mark Jaffe is always highlighting my podcast on Twitter. For every time I see his tag, I'm always humbled and grateful to meet people who help me, market my content. But yeah, everyone has been a blessing. and they're all part of my success story as well. They also motivate me to keep creating content on intellectual property, to never give up. And that it's kind of like my big dream of, having a podcast that would live after me. So repositioning myself and making sure that I'm building a proper brand as a podcast, not just in Nigeria but Africa and globally as well. I think I'll stop there.
Rita shares her approach to simplifying intricate legal concepts. She uses clear language, avoids ambiguity, and collaborates with experts for challenging topics.
What has really helped me is the advice I got when I was doing my master's research. So my supervisor then was like, when you're writing, write in a way that a layman, someone who's not a lawyer, if he picks up your project, you'll be able to understand. So I've tried my best for every time I'm doing my research or creating my content to use clear and simple terms, concise terms. Even as lawyers, we are trained to not draft or write ambiguous terms. You're trained to be able to break or explain the concept or the topic in question to a layman that when he's consulting, he's able to understand it. You can't keep using legal maxims, citing a lot of sections. I mean, I know I do cite sections sometimes when I need to buttress my arguments or expand on the topic where there's a need for that, but learning how to use simple terms so that someone who is not a lawyer will be able to understand. And I think so far I've been doing a good job. And then it depends on the topic as well. If it's an area that I feel, okay, I'm not so strong in it, I then reach out to guests. And this is where my guest editions always comes through. I think what I would say I've benefited a lot from this is if the person I think can actually do it, I reach out to them and the person feels he can't, he always refers me to someone who is more knowledgeable about that topic, because IP, as much as it's evolving in Nigeria, it has developed in the countries like the US and the UK. But then you find out that every day new emerging areas and issues keep springing up, especially because we're in the digital era. So if it's something I'm not so familiar with, two things: I either do an in-depth research, or I reach out to someone that's considered to be an expert or someone that I've been following his content, and ask them to be a guest on my show. If they agree, lucky for me. If they don't agree, then and I have to decide, do I go ahead and try my hands at it or just let it go? Sometimes it also helps you learn and understand the topic as well. So that's basically how I do it.
From setting clear goals and selecting a unique name to embracing consistency and safeguarding intellectual property, Rita's insights offer a comprehensive guide to starting and thriving in the podcasting world. So if you're considering podcasting as a hobby or a potential business venture, I think you'll find these tips pretty useful.
Well, the advice I'll give anyone that wants to begin podcasting is, first, have a goal for your podcast. Is it a hobby, or do you see podcasting as a business that you want to use it as your secondary source of income? Then figure out the name. And while doing that, make sure that the name you pick is not similar to another brand's name. So we're talking trademarks now, So the name, the logo, make sure that is unique and distinctive and capable of distinguishing your podcast from another podcast. Even if it's in the same line of business. I know there are other intellectual property podcasts out there, but they all have different names. They have logos that are different from the one I use. Then when you start to do that, monitor your work, your progress online. Have it at the back of your head that you're not competing with anybody. I mean, don't get discouraged with the number of likes or streams. Keep pushing. Look for podcast community to network and learn from, read about podcasting, follow podcast conversation, and just be focused and remain consistent. It's not easy to stay consistent. I mean, anytime I miss a month, I think I've been doing that for the last 2 years. I miss a month where I don't do any podcast, but I create content, other kind of content in form of newsletter or microblogging and all of those things. But by the time I get back for the next month, that means I have to push out at least 3 to 4 for the next month. So I'm basically doing back to back to back. Read, research, be open to learning, researching, be open to collaborating, have a structure, define your goals. If it's going to be a big business for you, consider registering it within your jurisdiction, making it a corporate entity. Take your intangible asset, which is your name and logo and the content you create, your scripting and all those things which enjoys copyright protection seriously. Trade secrets is another aspect that you need to take notes of, especially when you now start involving third parties. What kind of confidential information are you going to share with a third party? But yeah, I think that's it. So carve out your niche, figure out the name, get recording, figure out the platform as well. I know there are a couple of African podcast hosting platforms that are coming out. So do your research and make sure you pick the right one for you, and get creating.
Rita talks about the benefits of podcasting communities. Such groups offer a valuable learning platform, providing free tips and support for podcasters. She points out the potential for collaborations and partnerships within the community, along with networking opportunities.
So the benefit of being part of a podcasting community is you learn a lot of things. You get free tips. Yeah, you get free tips. You can ask questions and people will want to help out. You start to improve on the way you do podcasting, getting the opportunity to get access to future collaborators and partners, networking opportunities. What else? I think that's basically it. Networking opportunities, collaboration opportunities, learning how to do podcasting right. I mean, not everyone is an expert yet, but then someone might drop a tip today. Like for instance, when I added my RSS link on AudioMac, because someone mentioned it on one of the podcast group I belong to. So I started doing a bit of research on platforms that I could add my RSS link. I think I had some other Nigerian own podcast platform reach out to me to consider them. So I did a bit of research as well, and added my RSS link. The main thing is reach. How do you get across to a wider audience? But there's also opportunities for you to listen to other people's podcasts. So you listen to theirs and see what you can do differently. You don't need to copy and paste. But because you have a niche, you now need to focus on that. So the beauty about having a niche is, if you're the only one, it gives you a competitive edge, because everyone's like, ooh, what is this podcast about? Let me listen to it. All those kind of things. But yeah, basically being in the right company so that you're doing podcasting right at the end of the day.
From her initial steps into microblogging on Twitter to her impactful podcasting venture, Rita's dedication to educating and advocating for intellectual property rights is truly inspiring. Don't forget to check out her podcast to delve deeper into the world of intellectual property and stay informed. That's IP series, and the link is in the show notes. Until next time, keep exploring the diverse world of podcasts.
Pretty sure it's Techzilla.
Of course it is. Who you think it was? Hey yo, eagle eye view from the Kilimanjaro, way above the clouds with my eye on the sparrow. Words pierce the air, invading your space, sneak in through your ears, change the look of your face. The storyteller in this digital era, could tell I got my groove back like my name was Stella. The vibe is stellar, but the message and the teller intertwining, defining the era. To those who oppose, I hereby propose the fist to the jaw. Would you prefer the nose? As the story goes, everybody knows Mr. Tony Yo, come correct with the flow. Hey yo, as the God podcaster, erstwhile known as the Shifu broadcaster, here to bring the peace to the world over. Haters can't connect, best to move over.